Hello everybody, so here is Black Angel again, and I'm here with a relatively short video or a very short video, it depends, about duality. So what is this duality I keep talking about, and why do I keep talking about duals and stuff like that? Now, the main reason why we start learning MBTI or Socionics is normally to start figuring out relationships with people around us. So the main focus of these theories is actually social psychology. When I talk about social psychology, I'm talking about the discipline in psychology that concentrates its efforts into understanding human behavior in matters of human relationships. So that it is with in a romantic relationship or in a friendly relationship, parents, children, family of any kind, anyway. Human relationships. So MBTI and Socionics are part of the disciplines, part of the strategies that some psychologists have come up with in matters of understanding human behavior concerning social relationships. Now, what concerns Myers-Briggs, they stopped the step before actually talking about interaction. So they roughly described something close to what Jung described as functions and types, and they just basically stopped there. They didn't define what kind of person, what kind of type gets along better with what kind of type. Socionics is instead a Russian discipline, and Russians are a lot more concerned with social psychology. A lot of great psychologists that belong in social psychology are Russian. And these guys, they're decided to build this theory that is called Socionics, that is a lot more structured and a lot more scientific in a way. So it's always based on observation, obviously. So we can never truly talk about science when we're talking psychology. But for as much as possible, as far as possible, Russian people tend to apply the scientific method to psychology. So I'm not going so far as to say that Socionics is a scientific discipline, but it's probably the closest thing to a scientific discipline that we have when it comes to typology. As a matter of fact, only a few samples of typology are accepted by general psychology, like, for example, MBTI tests, whereas other things are not. And that's exactly because a lot of tests are not scientifically based. Socionics is a parenthesis on its own, so it's probably very well accepted in Russian psychology, but it's not very well known in America and in Europe, so it starts being known in America, but not as much as it is in Russia and in the Eastern countries anyway. So this long introduction was to tell you that Socionics instead really focuses on the social part of the side of the coin. So the effort that Socionics makes is that not only of describing specifically what these types are based on, so going both into subconscious behaviors and visible subconscious behaviors, obviously, and rational behaviors, but also seeing how these behaviors interact with one another. So we're not talking about these huge tables that you see out there where you find cross types that get along with each other, and with this type doesn't get along, and there is no logic behind that. Because if you look at any MBTI relationships table, there is no logic behind it. No kind of logic whatsoever. It's simply people that randomly throw types together because they like the thing looking that way. And there is nothing having to do with what Myers and Briggs said at the time when they were writing. So they didn't have a say on that. Whereas socionics actually went into it. The first scientists that started talking about interaction and human relationships in socionics terms was Austria. And this person was a lady, if I don't go wrong. Anyway, this Austria, started building a set of basics looking at human interaction and testing social behavior among types according to socionics, obviously. And here comes duality into play. So duality is not the only kind of relationship that socionics proposes. There's also conflicting, there's extinction, there's benefit, there's plenty of relationships. I don't remember them all because every type has a different kind of relationship with a different kind of type. So there's mirror relationships, kindred relationships, there's any kind of relationship possible, any type that, any single type. Every single type has a relationship with every other type, so every other type has a name. Each of these kinds of relationships has a name. There's semi-duality, for example, also. So there's plenty of relationships out there. The two most clear and most important things to understand, in my opinion, are duality and conflict. Duality would be the type with which that specific type gets along the best. And this tells you why it is so important to figure out the original type correctly. So if you don't have your type correctly, nothing concerning socionics will ever apply to you. And that's why a lot of people keep posting on my channel that blah, 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 and I keep deleting stuff because it doesn't make sense and there is no reason why I should discuss about this kind of stuff with them. They're not my audience. That's basically what I'm talking about. Anyway, yeah, duality. What is this duality? Duality is the relationship with the person, with the type with which you get that type gets along the best. So how is duality built? According to Socionics, so Austria at first and every other Socionist out there, more specifically, you can look into Gulenko, for example, or Rainin, or also is another one that supports this kind of theory. But Gulenko is the one that actually talks a lot about social interactions. Anyway, there's Ovcharov and another guy that work together. Anyway, there's plenty of guys that talk about this stuff. And yeah, duality is built in such a way that the dominant function of the first type of person 1 helps the inferior function of the second person, so person 2. So we have person 1 that, for example, is an INFJ, so we know it's introverted intuition, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, extroverted sensing. So the dual would be the ESTP. So extroverted sensing, introverted thinking, extroverted feeling, introverted intuition. So as you can see, the functions are specular. They mirror each other. And in this mirroring each other, there is the strength of the first type that helps the weakness of the second type, and the strength of the second type that helps the weakness of the first type. The middle functions are even more important in my opinion, because an INFJ's extroverted feeling has the ability to help an ESTP develop his self-esteem just as much as an ESTP's TI as a second function helps an INFJ's introverted thinking tertiary develop her self-esteem. So these two functions, these central functions, are also very important. So as you can see, there is always a margin of personal growth. So an INFJ can learn from an ESTP how to handle difficult situations in which the INFJ needs to stand up for herself, to speak up, and to have a backbone. So that's what INFJs can learn from ESTPs. Whereas an ESTP can learn from INFJs how to wait for the possible outcome, to foresee the possible outcome, to always wonder what the possible outcome of that specific action could be, and all this kind of stuff. Introverted intuition. At the same time, both types can learn from each other. The ESTP can learn from the INFJ how to be a little bit more diplomatic, for example, with extroverted feeling, and the INFJ can learn how to be more structured and to have better and more solid categories, to understand things more in depth. So this just to make an example. I could also talk about ESFPs and INTJs. ESFPs and INTJs are duals. So here again, we have the same pattern with extroverted sensing and introverted intuition as we have on the other side. So the INTJ, the ESFP can learn from the INTJ to be a little bit more farsighted, whereas the ESFP can learn from the INTJ. The INTJ can learn from the ESFP to stand up for what their interests are, because the INTJ tends to be a little bit of a background type. And the second function of the INTJ, which is extroverted thinking, can help the ESFP handle their self-esteem through understanding public opinion, make use of public opinion, and figuring out knowledge and finding the best sources that are accepted by everybody, and so on. Whereas the ESFP's introverted feeling can help an INTJ develop their emotional side, their inner feelings, without showing others. Obviously, that's typical of INTJs. They don't show their emotions externally. But the ESFP can help them handle their emotions and learn handling their emotions. Feelings more than emotions, because introverted feeling is more on the side of feelings, and extroverted feeling is more on the side of emotion. But when I'm talking about introverted feeling tertiary, I'm talking about handling anything that moves inside that belongs the emotional sphere. So that's what I'm talking about. It's more feelings actually, but rather than. If you want to really understand the difference between emotion and feeling that I'm trying to make here, I would suggest to watch the movie Jonas. And that's a movie for children, so it's not going to be particularly difficult to follow or anything. It's quite interesting, actually. It's a nice movie. It's one of my favorite movies currently. I really enjoyed it, and it really explains well what feelings are and what emotions are, and it makes a deep difference. So anytime they're talking about things that are not allowed in the community in that movie, they're talking about extroverted feeling. Whenever they're talking about things that are allowed in the community, they're talking about introverted feeling. That's Jonas community is a very introverted feeling kind of environment. So yeah, other examples of duality that come to mind can be ESFJ. ESFJ and INTP. INTPs tend to be wrapped up in their heads and very closed, as every introverted thinking type. And ESFJs instead are very open up and open to others. So the ESFJ can teach the INTP, can show the INTP how to be a little bit more open to others, whereas the INTP can teach the INFJ to be a little bit more structured and can lend the INFJ, the ESFJ. Sorry, I'm going nuts. Sorry, I'm very tired, and I still have flu. So again, from the beginning, the INTP tends to be a little bit close and wrapped up in themselves. So the ESFJ can teach them to be a little more open up with people. And the INTP can teach the ESFJ to be a little bit more structured and to have their thoughts and their ideas a little bit more orderly in some way. Yeah, when we talk about introverted thinking, we're always talking about internal structure. So it's nothing having to do with the external environment. It's not like an INTP is going to organize an ESFJ's clothes. That would drive the ESFJ insane. She probably would try to kill the INTP in his sleep if they are even capable of something like that. ESFJs are really like Labradors. And another thing that they can do for each other, the ESFJ with introverted sensing auxiliary can help the INTP's self-esteem by helping them relax a little bit, while the INTP with auxiliary extrovert intuition can help the ESFJ live and feel the external environment a little bit more harmonic and see the opportunities that life throws at them. So these are a couple of examples just to give you an idea of what duality is and how it works, and why I keep stressing that it is extremely important to understand this thing. Now, this said, I want to add a little bit of practical advice. People don't normally get along immediately with their dual. And that's because we are so used to challenging ourselves from the wrong perspective. A lot of people out there believe that the way to grow is to expose themselves to what, on the contrary, would be the conflicting type. So doing things that make them uncomfortable. And that's because we often hear this thing about going out of your comfort zone. Going out of your comfort zone means that you need to learn to do those things that are part of your personality, but you normally don't do because you don't feel sure about it. That's what it means to go out of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean to change your personality radically or to do things that make you completely uncomfortable. So, one example for an INFJ, it would be a good idea to go out of her or his comfort zone in terms of extroverted sensing, so to start learning, standing up for themselves. But it would be an extremely bad idea to try to organize their work and someone else's work. This would be completely idiotic for an INFJ. And that's because it would, first of all, go against their personality, because the vulnerable function always goes against and clashes with the dominant function in some way. As a matter of fact, extroverted thinking organizes things from a logic perspective, whereas introverted intuition organizes things from a temporal point of view. So these two kinds of organization clash with each other. So if an INFJ started trying to use extroverted thinking, they would go insane and they would start disintegrating and not integrating. Whereas an INFJ that stands up for herself and starts telling people what her opinions are and why she believes those things, without being aggressive or anything, just defending their position in a civil way, that's a great step forward for an INFJ, and that's personal growth. It is actually very important to learn to let go of everything related to the vulnerabilities of the person. And when I talk about vulnerabilities, I'm talking about those things that are not part of a person's personality. What example can I give in this sense? I'm thinking For an INFP, for example, to stand up for themselves would be counterproductive. It would make them neurotic. And telling an INFP to stand up for themselves means to hurt them deeply. And if they start telling themselves that they have to stand up for their rights, they're going to become more and more neurotic. And that's also another way in which duality comes to help. Because our dual, the dual of the INFP, for example, which is the ESTJ, is, how do I say that? I normally like to say that they are subconsciously programmed, but they are naturally programmed in such a way that they're going to show the INFP that standing up for themselves is not important and it doesn't matter. So that for me is like saying that it's not important to stand up for yourself. For me, feels like nails on a chalkboard, because I'm the kind of type that needs to stand up for herself. But if an INFP comes to me and asks me for advice for personal growth, the first thing that I'm going to tell them is to let go of standing up for themselves, to find other ways and to find their way to handle the situation through their physical sensation, to listen to their body and stuff like that. And that's because I respect people for who they are. Anyway, duality also has another trait, and this is something that I want to say even if I'm making this thing very long. Being in the company of our dual makes things extremely natural. Once the first impact is overcome and the relationship starts, the dual actually has the power to recharge our batteries. This is a conclusion Ausher came to, and the other scientists couldn't do anything but confirm. And that's something that they found really interesting, that after a full day of conflict and difficulties and struggle and whatever, when dual pairs came home and talked to their dual for half an hour, it was like the whole day had been roses and blossoms. That's something very interesting to consider. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your partner, but to have a dual in your life is going to be extremely important. Something to keep into account when meeting a dual is, if it's someone of the opposite sex, take a step back for a moment from your feelings, because it's going to feel like you have a crush. It's going to feel that way with the same sex and with the opposite sex, that whatever you are, that you are heterosexual or homosexual, it's going to feel the same way with opposite sex and same sex. So if you ever had an experience of meeting someone your same sex and you're heterosexual, and you suddenly felt attracted in some way, and you couldn't explain that, and you started wondering if you're probably homosexual, you're probably not. You probably just met your dual. Or you are and it wasn't your dual, but chances are that you probably met your dual and it was your dual the same sex. So this is something that I experienced myself, that I see happen a lot up there, and I have a lot of fun seeing people posting stuff about this stuff on social networks and social forums. So I have fun because I find it very, very, very beautiful that a person feels that good. That's why I have fun watching it, not because I'm a bitch of some sort. Anyway, just wanted to be clear about it. So I think for the moment I will close this here. I had to make a very long introduction. I think it would have deserved another video. But anyway, it's okay to make it in the duality video. And I will probably talk about these relationships and other kinds of the relationships, obviously, in other videos. And for this time, I will close this here and I will talk to you soon. Bye.